In this lesson, I am going to write a paragraph about an inference using MELELEC to guide my organization. Before I start my paragraph about an inference, let's take a close look at the organization. The M is the main idea, which will state an inference about a character that I will be proving throughout the paragraph. The E will give me the opportunity to elaborate on the main idea. The L is a link to the story that I can use to prove the inference. The E is the explanation of how the link proves the inference. The second L is another link to the story that can prove the inference. The second E is the explanation of how the second link proves the inference. And the C is a closing thought about the main idea. For this example, I will be proving an inference about Sergeant Major Morris from The Monkey's Paw. The first step is to come up with the inference and state that inference in your M. In The Monkey's Paw, Sergeant Major Morris is filled with anxiety. The next step is to elaborate on the main idea. He never admits it, but actions often reveal the truth behind a character. At this point, I have the M and I have the E, which elaborates on the M. The next step is to come up with a link. While reading the story, I took note of this passage on page 48, which I can use in this paragraph. When the monkey's paw is first mentioned, Morris absent-mindedly put his empty glass to his lips and then set it down again. The explanation is the opportunity to offer my interpretation of the link and use that interpretation to prove the inference. He is trying to occupy his hands, which is a nervous reaction to an uncomfortable situation. Here is the L. Here is the E that explains that L, and together they prove the inference. Now I need to go back to the story and find my second link. Here's another passage on page 48 that will work well for that second link. After his glass is refilled, he makes another comment about the paw before his glass tapped against his strong, hard teeth. Like the previous E, this is the opportunity to offer my interpretation of the link and use that interpretation to prove the inference. At this point, he is so nervous that his hands are uncontrollably shaking. Here is the second L. Here is the E that explains that L, and together they prove the inference. The C is the opportunity to provide a strong closing thought about the main idea. By making these inferences, a reader can realize that Sergeant Major Morris is experiencing anxiety, which adds to the fear and mystery surrounding the monkey's paw. The C is the final thought about the M. Here's a look at how I used MELELEC to organize this paragraph. The E is an elaboration of the M. The first link and explanation prove the inference. The second link and explanation also prove the inference. And our C is that strong closing thought about the main idea. Now, before I end this lesson, I want to say that MELELEC is a great tool that can help a writer organize their thoughts, but it will not magically write your paragraph for you. You need to put effort into the reading first and pay attention for inferences. If you put solid effort into the reading, the writing will be much more rewarding. Because of the effort I put into the entire process, I have a paragraph that I am proud to share with you today. Thanks for taking the time to watch and listen to this lesson on how to write a paragraph about an inference using MELELEC. As you are reading literature, be on the lookout for inferences that you can prove. When you find them, use MELELEC as your guide to explain and prove those inferences. Good luck.